In the book Creative HTML Design that Linda and I wrote back in the 90s, we presented an example of an image that had been chopped up and reassembled using HTML tables. This was a common technique in those days because it allowed parts of the image to be used in different ways. This movie presents an HTML5 compatible way to accomplish the same thing today. If we open this folder called Cut Apart in the Chapter 6 folder of the exercise files, you'll see two versions of this example. One version uses tables, and this is basically the way that we did this back in the 90s. It's a little bit different than our original example because some of the tags and attributes are better defined today in HTML5 than they were back then, but this is valid HTML5, and it uses a combination of tables and style sheets to accomplish this. And I'm just going to open this up in the browser, and you'll see what looks like an image, but you'll notice that it's made up of 12 different images that are all assembled together in a table. And if we look back here in this folder under images, you'll see here are these 12 images. I'm going to use the quick view feature here on this Mac, and we can look at each of these images as I scroll down the list. And you see these are all the different parts of that one image. And then here's the whole image. So that's the tables version. What I'm going to show you now is the HTML5-ish way to do this. And there it is in the browser, and here it is in our text editor. It's actually a little bit simpler. It's a little bit smaller. It has a few less lines of code. And you can see it's actually very clear. All we have here is a set of divs and the images. And everything else is done in the CSS and really just with a couple of lines of CSS. And here it is in the browser, exactly the same result. And each of these images, if I do a view image, you'll see they're all the little pieces of the image. So here's how this works. We have a div with a class called CutApart, and that's really only used for context. In CSS, I'm using descendant selectors. So where C row is a descendant of CutApart, this style will be applied, which basically just has a clear. And where image is a descendant of CutApart, it changes the image to block mode and floats it to the left. Actually, if I just float it to the left, it'll make it block mode anyway. I just put this in also to remind myself that that's what it's doing. And that's all there is to it. So in each of these div class C row, we have a number of images, and these images float left, and then they clear. And the clear happens because the clear is in the C row. So when the next C row shows up, we get a clear and then a number of images that are floating left. And when you float objects next to each other, all in the same direction, they stack up in that direction. And so all this is doing is it's stacking up image, 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 and then image, 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 like that in these different rows. You can see it a little bit better. If I go ahead and put a border on the image and we reload this, you can see each of the images now has this red border, and you can see all the pieces of them. So these four stack up in the first C row, these four stack up in the second C row, and these four stack up in the third C row. Now this technique does have one problem. I'm going to go ahead and take that border off and reload over here. If I come up here after all of this and I say P, this is a paragraph of text, and I save that and load it up, you'll notice that the text comes up here in the last C row because the last C row is floated to the left. And so what this requires is a clear. Now, I could create a class up here called clear, and then I could put that class on this paragraph, and that would actually solve the problem. And I hit a reload here, and we see now the paragraph is down there. The problem with this solution is that it's not consistent enough. It's not repeatable enough. It would be easy for me to forget to put this clear in and to forget why this is a problem and to end up having to reinvent the wheel. What I really need is something that I can put inside of here. So what I've done, and I actually do this in most of my style sheets because I come across this kind of problem often enough, I create a class called clear that does this. It makes it possible for me to have an object like a paragraph or a div or something. And I'm just going to take this out of here, and I'm going to close this paragraph like I'm supposed to. I'm going to come up in here, and I'm going to just say P class equals clear empty. And now all I have to do is remember to put that in every time I do this pattern, and you'll see that it works perfectly. I reload this, and there's my paragraph. And in this case, I have a normal paragraph here, and it's got the leading above it just like I would expect, and it actually looks exactly like it's supposed to look. So now we have a good repeatable pattern. It's got a manageable amount of CSS, and it solves the whole problem, and it allows us to assemble our images in a very simple way. So this technique can be handy for manipulating parts of an image, say with animation or rollovers. It also demonstrates just how powerful the combination of HTML and CSS can be when used thoughtfully.